About 20 minutes from my hometown is a large resort that has just about anything you can think of. It gets most of its use because the resort is probably the largest casino within a 60-mile radius. But it is so much more than just a casino. It has a spa, dozens of suites for weddings and honeymoons, and a massive hall for concerts and shows. I even saw an episode of WWE SmackDown there when I was about 12 years old. The resort truly has everything. Back in 2019, I was surprised to see that the resort would be hosting this video game convention. They had recently just built a brand new convention center, and I was pretty excited to check it out by attending a gaming convention. I've always been an avid gamer, and I never thought that I would be able to attend a convention so close to home. Tickets were pricey, but my friend's dad was a manager at the resort, so I was able to get 2 tickets for a super cheap price. When it came time for the convention, my friend bailed and nobody else could go, so I ended up attending the convention all by myself. I was bummed out at first, but once I got there and saw everything going on, I was instantly in a better mood. All the major systems were on display, and new game trailers were being announced. But honestly, since this wasn't one of the major gaming conventions, there wasn't anything super newsworthy going on. It was mostly just gaming memorabilia and mega fans sharing their love for games. While I was walking around, meeting people, most notably Charles Andre Martinet, the man who voices Mario in the video game, I met another guy named Chuck. He was also alone, and we kind of seemed to click right away. At first, he didn't seem like he belonged. He was wearing a suit and had his hair greased back. Everyone else was wearing t-shirts, jeans, or cosplaying, but not this guy Chuck. At first, I thought he worked at the resort, or maybe was some sort of gaming executive, but it turns out he was just a gamer like me. I told myself that you can't always judge a book by its cover. We spent hours talking. We ended up hitting up all the booths at the convention and even saw one of the guest speakers. At around 11, we decided to grab some food. Since the casino was 24 hours, they also had a few food options that served food all night long. We grabbed a burger and some fries and then hit up the bar inside the casino. I'm not sure if it was because of the convention, but the atmosphere in the bar was really great. After a few drinks, I was starting to feel it a little bit and told Chuck that I was going to call it a night. We exchanged numbers and I told him that we would definitely hang out again soon, and I really meant it. Prior to the convention coming to town, I had the foresight to book a room in the resort. I didn't want to drive home late, and I thought maybe I would go to the casino after the convention. I knew myself well, and I knew if I went to the casino, I would probably drink. So I made my way to the room and started getting myself ready for bed. I was actually exhausted, and at this point of the night, it was probably closing in on about 3 in the morning. I was so tired that I didn't even turn on the TV or pull out my phone to listen to music or anything. I just got into bed and closed my eyes. I started to drift in and out of consciousness, and I thought that I could hear something coming from the corner of the room where the door was. I slowly got out of bed, and I could see the outline of 2 feet from underneath the door. I kept all my lights off in the room so I could see the light illuminating from underneath the door. While I was staring at the feet of the obvious figure behind my door, my mind started to race. The first thing, and really the only thing that came to my mind, was that it was someone from the bar who was drunk and was clearly the wrong door or the wrong room. While I was staring at the door, I noticed that whoever was outside the door started to jostle the doorknob. It wasn't just a jiggle either. This person was aggressively trying to open the door. I was admittedly freaked out at this point, and I slowly approached the door so I could look through the lookout of the door. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was him. It was Chuck, standing right outside my room. He kept looking back and forth, kind of mumbling to himself, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. He was still wearing that suit, but he was wearing a baseball cap now for some reason. I was trying to be quiet and contemplate what to do without bringing attention to myself. This was clearly sketchy, and I had no idea what was happening, and then it hit me. I never told Chuck that I was staying at the hotel, let alone what room that I was staying in. While I was leaning against the wall, I heard a loud bang. I looked through the hole, and now Chuck was shoulder-checking this door, looking both ways after each thud into the door. Finally, he just appeared to give up, and when I looked through the hole again, he was gone. well, at least out of sight in the small view. I called the front desk and alerted them of what was going on, and they took the liberty of calling the police. While I was waiting for the cops, I noticed a note had been slipped underneath my door. I never heard it, so I had no idea when the note had actually come through, and all that was written on it was, "Pleasure to have met you. Too bad the door was locked," and it was signed with just the letter C. I told the police everything, and even gave them the number that Chuck gave me, but I guess the number wasn't his. The hotel checked the cameras, and they clearly had footage of a man in a suit on my floor going back and forth knocking on my door, but that was about it. They weren't able to see where he went. Given the timestamp of the security footage, he appeared to leave the note under the door while I was on the phone with the desk. They saw him leaving the hotel on camera at around 4:30 in the morning, and that was the last anyone had ever seen of this Chuck. I haven't returned to that resort or convention center since that night in 2019, and for obvious reasons, I never want to go back. To this day, I still wonder about that Chuck, and I wonder if he's out there causing trouble for other people. I cringe when I think about what he could have possibly wanted that night, and I'm just so thankful that I lock my doors. The ones we consider friends can just as easily be monsters. This short story happened to me about 10 years ago, and whenever I stop and think about it, I'm reminded just how messed up people are in this life. About an hour from my house was going to be this Mortal Kombat convention based on the video game, in case you don't know what Mortal Kombat is. I'm a massive fan of the franchise, and during this period of my life, I was playing a ton of games. Even though I was excited about the convention, what I was most excited about was that they were going to have a Mortal Kombat gaming tournament. I don't have a lot of skills, but one thing I am good at is Mortal Kombat. I begged my girlfriend for a while, and she finally agreed to go with me, a decision that she still regrets to this day. And the day finally came, and we arrived early so I could sign some form about the game tournament. I had to register early to participate, but I still needed to fill out some stuff upon arrival. After I met the spokesperson, my girlfriend and I checked into our hotel, which was across the street from the convention center. The hotel was probably the only thing I wasn't crazy about. It was old and dark, and it just didn't feel clean. The price wasn't great, but I figured that was because of the close proximity to the event. When we were checking in and walking to the room, we saw less than friendly characters walking around, and we started to feel more comfortable when we arrived on our floor and saw a bunch of people around our age, all wearing Mortal Kombat t-shirts and hats. As sketchy as this place was, at least we were in it together with all these other fans. We rested for a little while and then made our way to the convention, which was awesome. We spent a few hours checking out art and meeting some actual voice actors and game developers. At 7 p.m., the tournament was about to start, and I had a blast. I won a few rounds but then got eliminated in one of the final rounds, but I wasn't even upset because it was just so much fun, and I ended up making some friends that I'm still close with today. The one bad thing that happened at the convention, though, was that while I was on the stage going one-on-one with an opponent, my girlfriend was just sitting in the crowd watching, basically being a good sport. The bad thing was she ended up getting approached by some guy cosplaying as the character Cabal. If you don't know the character, you should look him up. It's one of the stranger and creepier characters, and he wears this mask that has tubes and stuff coming out of it. She was initially nice and told the guy that his costume was cool, even though she didn't mean it and just wanted the interaction to actually end. Unfortunately, the guy wouldn't leave her alone. After I was eliminated, I made my way back down and saw the guy basically following my girlfriend. Not being one for confrontation, I just put my arm around my girl, kissed her on the head, and asked if she wanted to grab some food. The guy got the hint, which I was hoping would happen, and he started to wander away, kind of humming to himself, which was really weird in the moment. The rest of the night was fun, and we sort of just hung out for a while. After the convention, the few friends that I had made decided to go out for a drink with us, and we ended up staying at the bar until 2 a.m. When we got back from the bar, I laid right down since I was really exhausted, but my girlfriend was now pretty wide awake. After going to the bar, she was energized and claimed that she was hungry. I told her the food options were slim, but I remember seeing a vending machine down the hall past the elevators. I gave my girlfriend some cash and told her to grab a bunch of snacks. She left the room and returned a minute later, and she was as white as a ghost. She said she was looking at the options in the machine, and she said a very quiet voice could be heard from behind the machine that just said, "Hey, good to see you again." She told me that she didn't interact and she just turned around and walked back down the dark hallway back to our room. I'm a horrible boyfriend because I actually didn't believe her at all. She's a naturally jumpy person, so I thought that she was probably just hearing things due to how much she had drank. I told her that I would walk down there and grab some snacks and prove that nobody was down there. I didn't have her shirt on since I was laying in bed already, so she had taken off her zip-up sweatshirt, and I put that on as I walked down to the vending machine. I'm not gonna lie, just the dark atmosphere of the hallway and vending machine nook was a little off-putting. I put $1 into the machine, but before I could put more money in, I heard the voice. In an aggressive whisper, they said, "Hey, don't leave this time." Before I could react, a hand actually came from behind the machine and grabbed my arm. I jumped back and they let go. Standing in the shadows of the dark room was a guy wearing a long coat with the sleeves cut off. He had long and straight black hair, and I exclaimed some sort of profanity towards him, and while he stared at me, he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else. I'm just waiting here for a friend." Well, I was able to put the pieces together. He was waiting for my girlfriend. I didn't say anything, and I just turned around and briskly ran to my room. I looked back one more time, and he was just standing at the end of the hallway, and the image of his horrifying demeanor was still burned into my brain. When I got back to the room, I called the police, who must have been right outside the building because they were there in what seemed like seconds. They actually caught the guy and escorted him out of the hotel, not in handcuffs though. They did put him in the back of a squad car, but like I said, it didn't appear like he was being detained or anything. It was a long couple of hours after that. Between answering questions, talking to staff, and just overall trying to calm down, we didn't sleep at all. We decided to check out early and chalk up the rest of the stay as a loss. While my girlfriend was gathering everything in the room, I finally made my way to the vending machine to grab those snacks, and curiosity caused me to look behind the machine. And lying on the floor was a small mask with tubes coming out of it. It was the Cabal mask, the same mask of the man from the convention the night prior. Somehow this person from the convention stalked us back to our room, and whatever his intentions were, I'm sure they weren't good. I didn't tell my girlfriend about the mask since I figured that she had gone through enough. I don't know what happened to that Cabal impersonator. I just hope that we never cross paths again. Back in 2016, I believe, Dragon Ball Super was coming to America with the English dub, and as a lifelong Dragon Ball fan, I was thrilled. Leading up to its release, the cast and crew of the American version were touring all over the United States. I got tickets to one of the anime conventions they were going to be appearing at, and I was so pumped to meet the voices behind many of my childhood heroes. The convention itself was an anime convention, and it had a countless number of things to do. But Dragon Ball was definitely the main focus of the event, at least it felt that way to me. The lines to meet the cast were super long, and the rooms where they were speaking and answering questions were filled to the brim. As ridiculous as it may sound, it was like being at a rock concert. The people were screaming and yelling with excitement, myself included. Being that my friends don't like anime and never got into Dragon Ball growing up, I attended the convention all by myself. I didn't mind being alone at the convention. So many like-minded people were in attendance that I would have rather just been there alone in general. If my non-anime friends were there, I would have felt the need to babysit them instead of just letting loose and being myself. At some point in the afternoon, I met a girl, and I was instantly head over heels for her, believe it or not. Not only was she a super Dragon Ball fan like me, but she was dressed like one of the characters from the show, Bulma. If anybody out there is a fan of Dragon Ball, I'm sure you'll know the outfit I'm about to describe. Back in the early days of Dragon Ball Z, Bulma goes to the planet Namek, and she's wearing all these black leggings and this yellow coat. This woman at the convention had her exact outfit on and blue hair and all that. She told me her name was Jessie, and we hit it off. We spent the remainder of the convention together, and I actually have a picture of her, me, and Sean Schemmel, who was the voice character of Goku in the English dub of the show. Around 9 p.m., she asked me if I wanted to go back to her house, which she said was only about 20 minutes from the venue. It took very little convincing to get me to go with her. I was planning on just driving home anyway, so to me, this was an awesome way to continue my already amazing night. We got to her house, and I hate to say this, but I felt a little uncomfortable. She did not live in a nice neighborhood at all. All the houses looked beat up and almost falling apart, and many of the houses on the street were boarded up and condemned. I was happy that I drove my own car and followed her because the more I looked at the houses, the more I was ready to drive home that evening in case the night didn't go well. We parked in front of this big brick house that was mostly concealed in the darkness. I parked in the street in front of the house as she pulled into the driveway and waved for me to follow her to the back door, which I did. We walked inside the back door of the house, and I just remember being shocked that anybody could actually live there. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. I think at this point I was just blinded by my infatuation with this new girl, Jessie, and I didn't see any of those red flags around me. Before I could even open my mouth to say anything, she spoke up first and said that she needed to use the bathroom quickly and that she would be right out. I thought it was weird that she didn't bring me into the living room or offer me a seat or anything. I was just standing in this small room and there was trash everywhere. In this brief moment alone, I was finally starting to come to my senses, and I was becoming aware that something was not right. While my alarm bells went off just a little bit too late, I felt some strike to the back of my head, and I fell to the ground. I tried to immediately jump back up, but before I could get to my feet, some guy with some hooded sweatshirt kicked me back down to the ground and demanded that I give him my wallet. I handed it over with no struggle on my end. My life was far more important than anything in that wallet, and that large man shouted to Jessie that he had the wallet, and she ran out from the other room, now just wearing a normal shirt with black leggings. They ran out of the house, and I heard their car drive away. I still just remained on the ground for a little while, in absolute shock of what had just happened. I eventually ran to my car and called the police as I drove away, and thankfully these idiots didn't rob my phone or my car keys. I was able to give the police a detailed description of Jessie, the picture of us from the convention, and I remember the color and make and model of her car. It didn't take long, but the police were able to track them down, and thank God they both were detained. I realized how lucky I am because this could have ended much worse than it did, but it doesn't change the fact that it was still one of the scariest moments of my life. When I was laying on that ground and the man was kicking me, I'd never been so scared. This was the last convention of any kind that I'd ever gone to, and after this nightmare of an evening, I'll probably never attend another one ever again. This story happened years ago when my friends and I were really into Pokemon. Objectively, this may not be the scariest story you've ever heard, but to me, this is one of the most unnerving things that has ever happened to me. When I think about the implications of what happened, I still can't believe people are this horrible. As I said before, my friends and I really like Pokemon. The cards were cool, but we were fans of the games, and we loved to play them competitively. At the time, the games Sun and Moon had just come out, and they were being heavily promoted at gaming and Nintendo conferences across the country. A gaming event was coming to our hometown, and the new Sun and Moon games were going to be heavily featured, as well as a rumored competitive battle tournament was in the works, and we couldn't miss this event. Let's fast forward a few months, we got our tickets and were excited about the event. We learned later that you need to qualify somehow for the tournament, which we didn't, so we were upset about that, but still excited about the experience nonetheless. At the very least, we could be spectators for the tournament, which sounded awesome to us. We weren't sports guys, so this was kind of like the Super Bowl for us. We spent the entire day taking pictures, talking to other Poke fans, and watching battles in the main convention hall. Around 4 in the afternoon, I was confronted by a taller man who looked like an official of the event somehow. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt and had a laminated badge hanging on a lanyard around his neck. In a very confident and professional tone, he says to me, "Hey there, friend. I can't help but notice you and your friends look like superfans. Is that correct?" Of course, I answered with an energetic response. Being at these types of events with other people who share your interests, you're always pumped up and energetic. And he laughed, and we made some small talk for a little while. One thing led to another, and then the man said, "Well, the reason I approached you today is for an unbelievable offer. I work for Nintendo, and we're planning on unveiling a new battle mechanic in the next Pokemon game. I need some folks to test the mechanics. Would your friends be interested?" I didn't even respond to the man. I just bowed my head and shook his hand. I was so excited I couldn't even think of the words to say. One of my friends who was standing there started to jump up and down like he won the lottery, and the man just laughed and said, Okay, you guys have to keep this quiet though, since obviously we haven't even announced the new game yet. Meet me and my team at this location tonight at 8 p.m. and we'll go to testing. Remember, you can't say anything, and my secretary will have you fill out some non-disclosure agreements when you arrive at the location, alright?" The man handed me a handwritten note with an address written on it, and the paper was signed with a name that was pretty much illegible. Before anybody out there starts judging us, remember, we were young and naive, and the atmosphere of the event had us thinking about what we wanted instead of what was clearly logical. When he was talking about non-disclosure agreements, to me, that made him sound legitimate. I was about to realize just how stupid and idiotic me and my friends truly were. We stayed at the event for a few more hours and then made our way to the address that the man gave us. We pulled into this lot next to a big, abandoned-looking building. There was an old furniture store sign above the door of the building, which told us that this building used to be some sort of furniture warehouse that clearly was not in business anymore. We stayed in the car for a minute because the situation was clearly kind of weird. We justified the weirdness by convincing ourselves that they needed a secure location to test this sensitive material, and the guy gave us no reason not to trust him, other than the fact that he didn't give us a name or a business card, but we wouldn't think about that little variable until later. Also, there were about 6 cars in the parking lot, so we figured that people were definitely inside, and it didn't take a lot of convincing ourselves that this was a legit opportunity and we would regret it if we passed it up. So against all our better judgment, we got out of the car and slowly made our way to the door. It was locked, so we knocked rather hard, but no answer. We looked through the glass on the door and it just looked like a dark and abandoned warehouse. One of my friends said that we should just leave, but we pretty much just ignored him because we all wanted this to really be real. While we were standing out front trying to figure out what to do, we heard a grinding sound. We looked at the side of the building and an overhead door was opening, the type meant for trailers to unload. A very skinny and frail-looking woman came out and told us to come on over so we could get started. We all felt a little hesitation towards this woman just because her appearance didn't look like someone who would be in a professional setting. Her hair seemed to be greasy and messed up, her clothes seemed to be tattered and covered in holes, but most notably, she was swaying back and forth as she was trying to summon us over. I just happened to look through the window on the door one last time before we started walking over, and I saw 2 people crouched next to the overhead door. I didn't see them when we originally looked into the window, but after the door was open, the streetlight was shining in, and it was clear to see at that point. I didn't say anything, and I just suddenly alerted my friends that we needed to leave. One of my friends said to the woman, "1 second, we forgot something in the car." We all started to move back toward the parking lot, and the woman was saying something, but it was incoherent, whatever she was trying to say. When we were just about to the car, we could hear multiple footsteps behind us now, and as we entered the vehicle, we saw 2 people with the woman, and they were coming directly towards our car. We just started it up and peeled out of there, and we just drove for hours. Thankfully, it didn't seem that they followed us, but we weren't so sure, and that's why we drove nearly all night, just in case. We did call the police and report this entire event, but the warehouse was empty by the time they arrived, and at that point, they couldn't do anything since these people didn't physically harm us, I guess. I have no idea what these people wanted from us, and it used to keep me up at night thinking about it. Be careful meeting people out there, and don't be afraid to ask some serious questions, because sometimes things really are too good to be true. I think my love for collecting cards stems back from my early childhood when my dad and I would open packs together. I remember specifically going around and grabbing Pokemon cards and Beanie Babies when I was a kid. Usually if I did good on a test or got a good report card, I could get a pack of cards or something that my dad and I could look at together. Now fast forward about 20 years and I still collect cards and enjoy opening them with my friends and family. I learned pretty early on in collecting that I couldn't keep everything, so I sold off most of my collection and only keep items that I have space for or that have sentimental value. That pandemic surge sure makes me wish that I held on to some items longer. Anyway, I don't collect anything specifically, just items that catch my eye, ranging from horror cards like Jaws and Fright Flicks to Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And even some football and basketball cards as well. For years, I belonged to forums, which then morphed into Facebook and Reddit pages, and on these sites, you meet people who share their collections, trade, and even sell cards. I made a few acquaintances and even a couple of friends over the years through these different forms of media, but one experience always sticks out more than others, and that's when I met Roger. Roger was someone I met online who also had an interest in error cards. You know, if something is off-center or misprinted during the manufacturing process. We talked casually for what I would guesstimate was 6 to 8 months until he sent me a message about a card convention. The message sticks out because I remember him saying, "Hey, I saw that this collectible convention and card show wasn't too far from you. Are you considering going?" I remember my immediate response was, "How do you know this show is close to me?" Knowing that I don't discuss my city or state online. I don't remember the exact response that he gave, but I think he said something along the lines that he picked up from my socials and some of the pictures I posted. Either way, I said yeah. I was planning on going to the convention to look around and maybe even thin out my collection a little more with some sales or trades. He mentioned that he was also attending and that we should meet up IRL and get a drink or coffee and take a tour of the convention. I agreed and figured that there wouldn't be any harm in meeting someone that I had chatted with pretty regularly in a public setting. And the day came and I was waiting to meet up with Roger when I got a tap on the shoulder. "Can I help you?" I said softly, and they said, "Hey, it's me, Roger." Now, I responded pretty quick. Oh, sorry, I didn't recognize you. You look different than you do on your socials." And he responds, "Yeah, those were a long time ago." I remember quickly saying, "Well, it's good to finally meet you," while thinking to myself, this is a completely different person. The images on his social media pages looked nothing like he did in person, not even remotely close. Before I could even process my thoughts, Roger said, "I want to introduce you to my friend Todd." I said, "Hey Todd, nice to meet you," and stuck out my hand. He ignored it and didn't say anything to me. He just said that he's just shy and will warm up. Already regretting my decision to meet up with someone that I didn't know that well from the internet, I said, "Well, should we go in and take a look around?" Everyone agreed and we headed in. In all honesty, it was an amazing show. There were so many cool collectibles and cards, and I didn't end up getting anything that day because, like I said at the time, I was trying to thin out my collection rather than increase its size. As we approached different areas and booths, I became more comfortable being around Roger and Todd. Todd was rude to the sellers, and Roger just seemed to go along with it. I ended up getting very quiet, and even though I had seen a lot of cool things, I was trying to plan my escape. Roger had to run to the bathroom, and I was alone with this Todd, and said, "Well, I think I'm going to head out when Roger gets back. I got some stuff to take care of when I get home." And for the first time that day, Todd looked at me and spoke. In this very firm voice, he says, "No, you're not. We made this trip all the way here, and you're going to make it worthwhile for us." I asked him what that meant, and just as I muttered that, Roger came back and said, "All right, what's next?" I said I had to head home because I had a lot of stuff to do with my family, and I told them it's been fun and it's been really nice to meet them. Roger's smile turned to a frown, and he says, "Well, if you want to be rude, take off. That's your choice." I ignored it and got up and just walked off at that point, thinking the first thing I was going to do was block that Roger on any site or app that we had communicated on. I came home and told my wife what had happened. She seemed disinterested and said something along the lines of, "I told you, everyone online is creepy." I tried to put the events from that day out of my head, but was still feeling a little bit uneasy or anxious. I decided to go to bed early at around 8:30 or so. I woke up to a loud bang at 1 a.m. I couldn't tell what it was, but it sounded like a table or chair had been tipped over. I told my wife to go back to sleep and that I would see what it is. I looked around the house and couldn't find anything out of place. I went down to the basement, and what I saw still gives me that sinking feeling in my stomach when I think about it. I saw Todd from earlier grabbing storage totes and carrying them up my storm doors. If you don't know what those are, they're like the Wizard of Oz basement doors that lead to your backyard directly to your basement. I screamed, "What the hell is going on?" He dropped the totes and flew up the stairs. I quickly tried to follow, but by the time I got up, he had run through the fence that had been open and jumped into a black van that then sped off. I think it took a good 10 to 15 minutes of everything to sink in and for my adrenaline to lower before I went inside and told my wife, and we called the police. I told the police everything about Roger and Todd, from my conversations over several months with Roger and meeting them that day. The police said that they most likely gained information on some items in my collection and scheduled the meetup to try and tail me or find out where the items were located. It made sense, honestly, and I don't have any other idea how Roger would have found out where I lived. And that's assuming Roger was actually involved, which I told the police that he would have had to have been. Nothing ever came from the investigation, though, and unfortunately, I didn't have enough info for the police to really do anything. Not much was taken, and honestly, I didn't really care. I was just glad that my family and I were okay. I still open up cards every now and again with my wife, but if I do buy or sell, I do it through eBay or other selling sites like that, and I always make sure to use my P.O. box as an address. I haven't been to any convention or card shows since this incident, and if I'm being honest, I don't see myself doing so at any point in the near future. My husband and I on paper look like two people that would never be together. He's got wild long hair, he's covered in tattoos, a long beard, and he plays guitar in a local rock band. I, on the other hand, I'm a nurse with no tattoos, no piercings, and I don't enjoy rock music at all. But love is funny, and you can't help who you fall for, and that defines our relationship perfectly. Every year, a tattoo convention comes through our town, and since we started dating, he has been asking me to go, and I have been able to get out of it every year, but last year I couldn't find an excuse, so I decided to finally go to the convention with him. Right away, this place was completely not my scene. It was loud, and the people there were, let's just say, aggressive. He was in his glory, and he ended up seeing one of his oldest friends that he had lost touch with. Turns out this guy had become a tattoo artist in another state, and he just so happened to have a booth at the convention. Long story short, he agreed to tattoo my husband for free, and my husband was going to show off his tattoo later in the evening at the tattoo competition that they had held. Well, I wasn't going to just sit at this booth for 4 hours while my husband was getting tattooed, so I decided to walk around and just pretend like I belonged at this convention. I'm not gonna lie, even though I had no idea what was going on, I ended up meeting some really cool people and seeing some awesome tattoos. The artists that I liked, I would take their card and put it in my bag so I could show my husband later how amazing some of the artists were. At some point during the night, I was starting to get hot, so I went outside to get some air. While I was sitting on the stone wall outside, I noticed this woman running out of the tree line that was directly across from me and nervously jogging through the parking lot. I watched this woman because she looked freaked out, and I was genuinely worried about her safety. A minute later, she was gone, and nobody ever came out of the forest after her, so I assumed the woman was just partying extra hard, if you know what I mean. After a few minutes, I went back into the venue and checked on my husband, who was about 50% done with his tattoo. I sat around for a while and then started to walk around again. As I walked around the convention, I noticed a side door was open that led to a dark hallway. As it got closer, I saw the girl from outside, and she was sitting on the ground in that back room. She looked borderline unconscious, so I confronted her, and when I got close, she jumped up and hit me with this large, blunt object that I'm pretty sure was actually a pipe. I fell to the ground, and the woman got in my face and just screamed. I stayed down, pretending like I was actually hurt. She ran out of the dark hall and ran into the convention center. I got up a few seconds later and started making my way back to my husband and his friend's booth. I was clenched over in pain, but nobody noticed because they probably just figured I got tattooed or something. When I got back to the booth, I finally started to freak out. I was able to keep my composure until that moment, but once my husband saw the pain that I was in, the waterworks started. They put the tattoo on hold and immediately notified the security that the venue had hired for the event, and then the security notified the police. When they showed up, I told them all about the interaction with the woman, and unfortunately, the description of the woman was nearly identical to every other woman that was at this event. Thankfully, the venue had some cameras, and they were able to pull up the feed and find the woman relatively easily. It was haunting watching the footage. Clear as day on the security footage, you could see the woman strike me in the head. In the same footage, after she hit me, she ran to the parking lot. She appeared to try and open numerous car doors. She was walking down the line of parked cars and just kept pulling on the handles. She finally found a car with the door unlocked, and she opened the door and was just sitting in the back seat. She wasn't hiding or anything like that. She was just sitting in the back seat like a passenger of the vehicle. The police and security checked the live feed, and sure enough, the woman was still sitting in the car. They ran out and detained the woman immediately, and she seemed to put up very little struggle. When they were arresting her, they did find a knife in her back pocket, and I'm just happy I never had to find out about the knife the hard way. It gave me chills thinking about it. What if she intended on using the knife for the owner of that vehicle? They notified the driver of that vehicle, and more disturbingly, the owner had never seen the woman before, so she was indeed just trying to find an unlocked car. It was clear that this woman was not in the right state of mind. I'm not sure what happened to her. I hope she got the help that she needs, because I don't think she was an evil or malicious person. I just think that she had some demons that got the better of her that night. Thankfully, nobody besides me had gotten hurt that evening, and if I didn't take that shot to the head, someone else may have been a lot more hurt than I was. This may sound weird, but I met my eventual husband on Xbox Live on the Xbox 360. We started playing Halo together after just randomly being on a team. That formed into a friendship, which eventually led to a romance that led to a marriage. I know for a lot of people that is crazy, and life isn't usually that fair, but I'm really lucky that he was the man that I thought that he was, and not some serial killer or something. We actually had a Halo-themed wedding, and every year we traveled to the city to attend a massive video game convention. It's to remind us of our love and how far we've come. The conventions aren't just Xbox or Microsoft related, but having Halo present is definitely a plus for us. It's something we look forward to every year, and it's something we will continue to do together for as long as we can. One time, though, a few years ago, we almost stopped going to conventions altogether. The day started like every other convention he and I had ever gone to. Loads of fun, buying souvenirs, attending live talks, and meeting awesome like-minded folks. During one of the talks, they set up microphones at the end of the aisles, and you could wait in line and ask questions to the speaker. My husband wanted to ask a question, so he got in line while I waited in our seat. I was mostly just listening to the questions and enjoying myself when I noticed just about the worst thing I could possibly ever want to see. Sitting about 10 feet away from me in another row was my ex-boyfriend. He grossed me out, and we broke up over 10 years ago for many different reasons. The Cliff Notes version is that he was an abusive and controlling man. I tried to pretend like I didn't see him and started looking in the other direction, but when I glanced back, he was clearly staring at me. I could feel his eyes penetrating me, and it was the most uncomfortable feeling I had ever felt. I was scared to get up and leave the convention hall because I thought that he might follow me. I also didn't want to say or do anything because I didn't want to bring unwanted attention to the situation. After all, he was just staring at me and not doing anything harmful, I guess. It took about 15 minutes for my husband to get to the front of the line, but when he finally did, I recorded his question, and after his little interaction, he came back to his seat. He could tell something was off with me, but he didn't know what. I didn't want to tell him about my ex because I thought it might make him uncomfortable. We eventually left the talk and started doing other activities at the convention. I noticed every few minutes that I could see my ex wandering somewhere near us, and it was making me grow increasingly more uncomfortable. Finally, my husband asked what was going on because it got to the point where I was giving him one-word answers and I was more focused on keeping an eye on my ex than I was on the actual conversation. I decided to tell my husband everything and point out where my ex was and basically told him just how horrible of a man he was, and most likely still is, since it seemed like he was now stalking me. I forget how amazing my husband is sometimes. I thought it would make him uncomfortable, but instead, he completely understood and asked if I wanted to leave. I didn't, but at the same time, I just wanted to get away from my ex, so we left. As we were walking to the car, my head felt like a bobblehead since I was looking all around trying to keep an eye on him, and that's when I realized that I hadn't seen him in over about 15 minutes, and I felt my first wave of relief in the last few hours. We got in the car and started the somewhat long drive home. On the highway, there was a lot of traffic, but once we got off, there was no traffic except for one car following us. Now, ordinarily, this wouldn't be an issue, but the car following us was following very closely, and they had their high beams on the entire time. We tried to remain calm, thinking it was just some coincidence, but he wouldn't pass us. If we sped up, so did he. I was convinced this tailgater was my ex, but my husband told me to not jump to conclusions and told me that it could have been anyone. We didn't want to head home and have this car follow us to our house, so we decided to pull into the lot of a 24-hour gas station that was about a mile from our home. As we turned in, they turned in as well. We parked and they stopped behind us, making it impossible to back out of the spot if I wanted to. We were trying to look into the windows of the vehicle, but the windows were too tinted and we couldn't make out the driver. I pulled out my phone and finally called the police, something I should have done a while ago. A minute or two later, the vehicle drove off and thankfully drove in the opposite direction of our house. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived and we described the vehicle and told them about my ex. They didn't seem too concerned and basically told me that I couldn't accuse my ex without any proof, and even though deep down I knew it was him. That night I didn't sleep at all, and I got 3 phone calls from a restricted number in the middle of the night. Every vehicle light that drove by our house that night made me grip the sheets in fear, but luckily the lights always stayed moving. I know my ex doesn't know where I live, but it's an irrational fear of mine. I know this story is more creepy than scary, but just put yourself in our shoes. We were terrified for our life. And if it truly was my ex tailgating, well, let's just say, I'm happy I'm able to write this story. This might go without saying, but in order to protect the privacy of me and my family, I'm going to refrain from using any real names or locations in the story just in case. Last year, my town hosted a Comic-Con event, and my wife and I decided to go since we had talked about it for years. We found a babysitter for our 2 small children, and we decided to just enjoy the night. Just to clear one thing up, this wasn't San Diego Comic-Con. This was a much smaller event since the city I live in is much smaller than San Diego, obviously, and me and my wife decided to dress up as characters from the Marvel movies. I know a lot of people these days are annoyed with the franchise, but it's something my wife and I bond over, so it will always have a special place in my heart. I was dressed up as Captain America, and my wife was dressed up as Gamora, a character from Guardians of the Galaxy. Since my wife designs costumes for a living, our outfits were top-notch. Her Gamora costume was so good that some people actually thought that she was Zoe Saldana, the actress who plays Gamora in the films. The event was having a costume contest for everyone cosplaying, so we decided to enter. I thought one of us was going to win for sure, until I saw dozens of incredible costumes. During the competition, we spent a lot of time hanging out with fellow contestants and actually met another couple who were also wearing costumes from the Marvel movies. And in no time at all, I was being my dorky self and making everyone laugh. My wife ended up finishing second in the competition to one of the most ridiculous and amazing Sephiroth costumes I had ever seen. Even though we all lost, we had fun, and the four of us continued to hang out for the majority of the evening. As the night progressed, I noticed that the man was starting to act kind of weird. He kept leaning over and telling my wife something in her ear, and every time she would tense up and just say, "I know." I mentioned it once to my wife, who told me it was just my imagination and that I needed to stop worrying so much. Since I tend to worry a lot, I agreed and went back to trying to have a good time. When my wife mentioned to them that we were thinking about leaving soon, they both got upset and insisted that we hang out for a while longer, but my wife told them that we had 2 small children at home and that we needed to get ready to leave. I remember getting visibly annoyed with the man because he kept saying that the kids will be fine for a little while longer, let's all grab a drink. Clearly, this man doesn't have small children, or any children of his own, because at this point of the evening, I just wanted to get home. My wife, being the smooth-talking diplomat that she is, was able to communicate to these 2 that we had to leave and that it wasn't personal and that we were having a really great time. A good thing for her, because I probably would have handled their pushy behavior in a much more toxic way. Finally, we left and made our drive home. The weird and uncomfortable final minutes with these 2 didn't cast a bad shadow over the entire convention. We had an awesome time, had fun pictures and videos, and most importantly, we made some awesome memories together. We got home, paid the babysitter, put the kids to bed since they were still awake waiting for us, and then we got into bed and decided to watch the first Avengers movie. Now, side note, that movie was our first date, hence why we have a special place in our hearts for Marvel. We both fell asleep at some point during the movie. In the middle of the night, my wife woke me up claiming that she had heard someone knocking on the door. I thought for sure that it was just her imagination, but I went and checked anyway. As I was walking to the front door with my wife standing right behind me, someone knocked on the door again. Before looking to see who was outside, I looked at the time and saw that it was 3 a.m, so right away I was completely freaked out. I approached the door and shouted, "Who is it?" A small pause, and then a confident and upbeat voice could be heard from the other side saying, "Howdy again, Cap. You guys ready for that drink yet?" We both looked at each other, and the voice was obvious. It was clearly our acquaintance from the convention. I opened the front door, but not the glass door, which was also locked. As soon as I opened the front door, he tried to grab the glass door, and thankfully it was locked, so he just took a step back and asked if we were ready to hang out. I was firm and angry and told them in so many words to get off our property, and if I ever saw him again, I would call the cops. They walked away smiling and basically just shaking their heads as if though it was some crazy surprise that I had flipped out on them. We got back into bed, and my wife thought that I should have called the cops, but I just didn't want to bother at that point. They left, so I assumed my tone was enough to get the message across, and I couldn't have been more wrong. I fell back asleep not long after the ordeal, but my wife was wide awake. About an hour later, she started to tap my shoulder, claiming that she could hear something from outside the bedroom. Again, I got up and opened the door, expecting to see nothing, but instead, standing at the end of the hall was the couple from the convention. They were in my home, standing there, still wearing their Marvel superhero costumes. Instinctively, I pushed my wife back into the room and shut the door, as I ran across the hall to close the door of my kids' bedroom. While that was happening, they were walking down the hall. Thankfully, my wife's phone was in the bedroom, so while I was holding my kids' bedroom door shut, my wife called the police. I could hear one of them trying to open the door to the room that I was in, and the other one was trying to open the other bedroom door my wife was in. Thank God, the cops showed up very quickly, and neither one of them resisted at all. They were still smiling and laughing even while they were being detained. I'm not sure if these monsters were on some sort of drug or just outright evil. As you would expect, they both were charged, and last I knew, they're still behind bars, but that's something I can't 100% confirm. The one thing that kills me, though, is that I have no idea why these two did what they did. They never said why they terrorized us or what their intentions were in the first place. The entire evening they seemed really great, and fun individuals for the most part. I don't know what clicked in their heads to make them snap like they did. I'm thankful our children were young enough that they don't seem to remember that night at all, and I hope to God nothing like this ever happens again. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for becoming a member. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, Ooga booga, ooga ooga ooga. Ega gun, ego gago baga, ego.